looks like the Bear Stearns type of moment where they're saying, don't worry about it, everything's contained and nothing is wrong here. Please look over there and not over here. But when we look at this situation, we can see that the situation is actually getting worse as time goes on. Right now, it looks like Home Capital, their deposits are down 70% from 1 week ago. And you have to remember, if we go back to the Greek bailout of 2015 and we look at the deposits in the banks, we saw people continually taking their funds out of the bank. And when we look at Home Capital Group, it looks like the same thing is happening here, where people are coming in, they're taking their funds out of this bank and saying, you know something, we don't trust it. We want our money and we want it before it fails. Now, we have to look into the future here a little bit, because once other banks start to fail, you know what's going to happen. We know there's a bail-in document. We know it's not just here in the United States. We know the UK is not the only other country that has a bail-in document. We know it's throughout Europe and many other countries. And we know eventually what they will do to stop the bank runs. They will shut the banks down. Now, they call them a bank holiday, where they say, oh, maybe there's a glitch in the system or something went on. We need to shut it down. Maybe they'll say there's a cyber attack or something like that, where they have to shut the banks down. And once they do shut the banks down, they will then implement capital controls. This is one way to stop people from taking out their currency. And then they will go in and take the currency from the bank, and pretty much you'll be left with nothing. This is what's going to happen in the future. And we can see already, people are already wise to this, because they've seen it going back in time, where the system starts to deteriorate, the bank starts to have troubles, and people run to the bank and say, you know something, let me get my currency before the whole entire banking system shuts down and capital controls are implemented and I can't get anything. Now, a lot of people have seen what happened in Greece, where they ran to the banks, because the people saw what happened in Cyprus, where those people didn't run to the banks to get their funds out, and all those people lost, hundreds of thousands of dollars that they saved and put into the bank. And then they had capital controls for over a year, where they couldn't really get to it at all. And we can see right now that this housing problem, well, it's not isolated in one area. We see out in Toronto, well, the bubbles are being blown up bigger and bigger and bigger. And what we're seeing right now, according to the Bank of Canada and the Ministry of Finance, high ratio mortgage borrowers are extending themselves to the limit. And these high ratio mortgages with low income levels is a growing trend in Canada. But Toronto and Vancouver, well, they take it to the next level. Across Canada, 18% of high risk mortgages have extremely low incomes for the homes they're in, and an increase of 38% over 2 years. Despite Vancouver's insanely high prices, Toronto still tops the risky business of subprime borrowers. Toronto takes the top spot with a 53% increase during the same period, bringing their total to 49%. Coming in second is Vancouver, which had a 25% increase over the past 2 years, bringing their total to 39%. These two cities are moving much faster than the average for the country, and they're getting to dangerously high levels. And what this means is the bubbles are growing and growing and growing and getting bigger. And what we're going to see is a lot of these bubbles pop. We're already on track for this, and it's going to get worse. Out in India, we see India is cracking down on cash, as we know. They're not allowing them to use debit or credit cards. What has taken hold is actually a money app, a mobile money app on the phone, and people are using this to make payments. Now, out in South Korea, they're doing away with coins and giving people payment cards where they'll get their change on a card. So a lot of these countries right now, they're doing away with cash. At least they're trying to make that move. And they're trying to basically create some type of electronic system which is still controlled by the central bank. It's not like Bitcoin, where that's completely out of the control of the central bank. They want people in this electronic system that is controlled by the central bank to keep control of the people, because once they have you with using complete electronic currency, you can never take the currency out and hold it physically. So that you're always in their system. You can't escape the system. And they always know what you're doing, and they can close your account or deny you something with a flick of a switch. We see here in the United States, American consumers, they are holding $1 trillion in revolving credit, mostly in credit card debt. And we see that this is actually getting worse and worse. Credit card specialist Capital One disclosed in its first quarter earnings last week that the provisions for credit losses rose to $2 billion, with net charge-offs jumping to 28% year over year to $1.5 billion. Now, consumer debt in the U.S., it is piling up right now. There's $1.4 trillion in student loans, which is already in crisis mode, and the government backs them, and they cannot be charged off unless there's something going on in your personal life and you say, hey, listen, I can't pay this off, and you have to prove it to the government. But otherwise, you cannot do anything but pay this off. Even if you don't have a job, you still have to pay it off in the end, unless you make an incredible case of how you can get out of it. Most of the time, they'll defer the payments until you're back up on your feet. We see the auto loan industry and the subprime loan package with auto loans is around $1.1 trillion. And this is a scenario where it's almost like the subprime security in real estate, but now they've done this in auto loans. And we can see right now, according to a study, 35% of people said they pay as much as they can on each of their debts each month, but they can't keep up with it. 19% said they pay off debts with the highest interest first and make minimum payments to others. And what we're seeing from all this is that people are having a very difficult time surviving and paying off all this debt, especially when wages and income are continually declining, when people are losing their jobs in retail and corporations, and business is starting to slow. And I'm hearing from a lot of people that business is starting to slow and things are not looking good out in the corporate world right now. And we can see that all of this is happening at once. I mean, look what is happening right now. Retail is in contraction. GDP is absolutely awful, and that is a manipulated number. We're actually in the negative range for GDP. We look at corporate defaults, we look at the defaults on credit cards, we look at auto loans and the delinquencies on auto loans, we look at what's happening around the rest of the country where people are just continually losing their jobs. The situation is actually dire right now, and the entire system is declining much faster than anyone thought. Now, Congress, well, they reached a deal to extend the debt ceiling until October 1st, and they're allowing the government to spend another $1 trillion to keep the government operational. And we know that this is not a good situation in itself. We know this is not going to help the situation because really think about it. Going back in time, they've always raised the debt ceiling. And now we're going to spend $1 trillion from May until October. And we can see the spending is accelerating right now. And as it continually accelerates, it's not going to help the situation because we're just adding more and more debt, more and more people losing the job, less revenue is coming into the government. It cannot pay the interest on this debt, and that means the whole system cannot operate. And that's what we are seeing right now. That's where we are headed. Now think about what the Fed is doing right now. GDP came out with a 0.7% number. And the Fed is looking at this saying, well, don't worry about that. That's a one-off thing. We believe that the country is going to grow at 3% from here on, and nobody has to worry about it. Well, this is absolutely ridiculous, because when did they ever see the country grow at 3%? When was the last time it actually grew 3% for a year? It hasn't. And remember, this GDP number has been manipulated. But what they're really trying to do is they're telling you, listen, we're telling you the economy's okay, and in the background what we're really doing is we're bringing it down. We're crashing it. But we want you to believe that the economy is fine. And we can see that June rate hikes, well, their odds are around 70% that they're going to raise the rates. And I don't see why they wouldn't, because they're on track to bring the entire system down. Japan right now is dumping a record amount of foreign bonds right now. They're dumping treasuries at a very fast pace. And President Trump said something very, very interesting today. Now, Mnuchin, he came out and said, everyone should thank me for the recent rise in bank stocks. And then Trump came out, and he said this at 8:10 Eastern Standard Time. Trump came out around 9:51 Eastern Standard Time and says, he's actively considering breaking up the big banks and bringing back Glass-Steagall. And you have to remember, Glass-Steagall was put into place right after the Great Depression. This way, banks couldn't speculate with their investments. And moving into the I think it was 1999 going into 2000, Glass-Steagall was removed and banks were able to speculate. This is where the subprime securities came about, and this is where everything started to go wrong. Now he's looking to bring back Glass-Steagall, break up the big banks, and most likely go after the central bank. Remember, Andrew Jackson is one of his heroes. He's hung his portrait right behind him, and the reason he's done this is because Andrew Jackson got rid of the second bank of the United States, which was a central bank. He got rid of it completely. That's what he campaigned on. And it looks like Trump is heading down the same exact path. I mean, when have you ever heard a president come out and say, hey, I'm considering breaking up the big banks? What other president hung Andrew Jackson up in their office? I mean, the central bank, they wanted to wipe Andrew Jackson off the $20 bill. That was their plan. So you completely forget that he removed the central bank. Actually, if you go previous to 1913, there was mention in the children's history books about the central banks and how they're destructive. And after 1913, it was like stricken from history. They didn't want you to know anything about it. And what we're seeing right now is he's making the move. He's making his move to get rid of the banking system the way we have it today. And normally when someone comes out and talks about the banking or the central banks or anything like this, well, it doesn't end up well for them. And there was an attempt on Andrew Jackson's life because he was trying to get rid of the central bank. And most likely, there will be an attempt on Trump's life once he starts making this move. And we can see that Trump says a lot of things. He's out there. He's causing chaos. I think this is all part of his plan to keep the corporate media, going all over the place and trying to figure out what he's all about. And I think in the background, he has a strategy. He knows what he needs to do. He knows he needs to go after the central bank. He knows this is the cause of the problem. And we're going to have to watch this very carefully because we can see right now, once he starts making his move towards the central bank, and I know people think it's just that easy, but no, these characters in the central bank, in the deep state, they don't want this to happen. Think about how wealthy they become from this banking system, where this central bank can create currency out of thin air and say, here you go, I just paid you off. Here's another 500,000. Here's another million. Just do what I say. It didn't cost the central banks anything. They created these funds out of thin air. Because what other purpose does the central bank serve? What, they monitor and they regulate the economy? No, they don't. Their mandate is not to regulate the economy. It's not to make it better for the people. Their mandate is to debt. Their mandate is to profit. It's a private corporation. We have a private corporation that is running this country. Why in the world would we even want this? Actually, the Founding Fathers, they didn't want this. This is what they fought against. This is what the Revolutionary War was all about. It wasn't about tea. It was about getting rid of the central banking system, having the government coin money, having the government, and when I say government, I'm talking about we the people, the government, having we the people, the government, manage our finances, create the currency without interest. So this way, when they have to balance the book, the books, they can do this very easily. Where all the money that is out in circulation, if you brought it all back in, the books would be balanced. Compared to the central banking system, where they loan the government currency and they attach interest to it, even if that currency comes back, they're still short. The books can never be balanced. And we can see right now, this is the move that Trump is making. This is why he's making these statements. This is why during his campaign, he mentioned the Federal Reserve. And if you notice, when Clinton was having her debate with Trump, she got very angry about mentioning the Federal Reserve. Well, the whole reason for this is to get rid of the central bank. And I believe in the background, this is exactly what he's doing. And these individuals that are in his administration, well, if you notice, he's actually starting to say the opposite of all these people, and all these people are trying to cover up what he's saying. And I believe that they're on two opposite sides here, where they're on different missions. Many of those individuals in his administration are trying to work with the central bank. They like what they have, and Trump is on one side getting rid of the central bank, and these people that are there, well, they're going to be removed eventually. And as we move forward, him taking down the central bank, which is a perfect time when the economy collapses, it's going to be a complete disaster because everything has to reset. Everything has to be started from scratch. It has to be reset. And this is what we're going to see. And no matter which way we look at it, there's a collapse coming, either from the central bank or from what Trump is trying to do. And we're going to feel pain no matter which way you look at it. Think about your household and you go through a bankruptcy. There is pain. Everything has to be reset. Debt has to be wiped out. Everything has to be restructured. So we are going to feel pain during this period, and this is why you need to be prepared for what is coming. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.